My name is Justine, by the way, and hello. And for those of you who are new to this room or just arrived at the conference, welcome to Fertility Planet. So exciting to have you here. So exciting to be having this first of its kind, totally groundbreaking conference. And we welcome you to today's topic in this room right now, which is fertility preservation and egg freezing. How does it work, and should I do it? Good question. So, the great thing is we have some wonderful experts here and people with experience to talk to you about this topic. And afterwards, we're going to have a Q&A, so please hold your questions. At the end, we will be passing on the mic. And just, I want you to all know that you really can feel free to ask any question. This is a safe space. This is a really wonderful topic to connect with each other, to empower ourselves with information, and also to reach out to others for support and to experts for support in this journey towards the most amazing thing, parenthood, right? So thanks for being here, and I'll start to introduce our panel. So first we have our moderator, who is Bridget Adams. And Bridget is the founder and CEO of Eggsurance, the first independent non-clinic related education and community website devoted to everything egg freezing. She started Eggsurance to educate and empower women to take control of their reproductive futures. And next we have Dr. Lee Meng. Dr. Meng is a leading, get this word is going to be hard, oocyte cryopreservation expert. And what that means, as Dr. Meng was explaining to me, that is he's an egg freezing expert. And he joined the California Fertility Partners team to establish an egg freezing program. He is a pioneer in the field of, here it comes again, oocyte cryopreservation. Oh gosh, it's oocyte. I knew that it was oocyte, and I'm saying oocyte because there's two O's. Maybe you'll make that mistake too. None of us are perfect. Oh gee. Okay, so oocyte cryopreservation, and has helped to develop the media protocol and techniques used in oocyte vitrification. I got that part right, though, right? No, it's vi. He said vi. It's vi. The doctor says vi. Okay, so and just so you know, for those of you who don't, and I didn't, vitrification is a certain type of freezing whereby the freezing process enables it to be more like glass versus more ice. Right. And there's advantages to that, which I'm sure the doctor will talk about. He's also involved in the development of a machine for egg freezing, which is going to be an automatic microfluidic associated vitrification. And with machines, they can do more accurate freezing than by hand. So how did I do about that? That's pretty good, right? Okay. Then we have Dr. Chanette. Dr. Philip Chanette is with Pacific Fertility Center in San Francisco, and he is rated one of the best doctors in America and recognized as top doctor in Consumer Guides to Top Medical Care. Dr. Chanette has been recognized in this way due to his compassion and experienced approach to treating complex infertility conditions, and that places him among the very best fertility doctors and fertility specialists in the nation. So we're very happy to have you, as we are have the two of you. I'm just neglecting my panelists, excuse me. Okay, so then next we have Alice Creasy. And Alice is a cancer survivor turned patient advocate for fertility preservation.
Oh, thanks.
And she founded Fertile Action, a nonprofit that helps women touched by cancer become mothers. And she also promotes Fertile Future, a California cryobank program. She's the author of a book called Too Young for This, and a forthcoming book called How to Build an Onco-Fertility Program. And then last we have Maymay Fox. Maymay is a New York Times best-selling author and a life coach. And as a coach, she works with you to create a living, breathing, adoptable plan for achieving your life goals and optimizing wellness. And that is our fantastic panel full of expertise and experience for you today. And now I'm going to turn it all over to Bridget.
Great. Well, I'm thrilled to have you all here today. I wish when I was going through the egg freezing process a year ago, I had the support, that was offered in this room and through Fertility Planit website, and, Alice and Mei who have gone through the procedure as well. So we really want to make this an interactive panel. Egg freezing is, as you all know, sort of a new frontier out there, but so many women are starting to freeze their eggs. And one of the things I'm trying to do with Eggsurance is really to get the education out there earlier. I think that so many women look at celebrities or look at people and say, well, I can have kids in my mid-40s, or so-and-so's mother's brother's father, sisters did this. And the reality is, our fertility declines at 35, and I'm going to let the doctors talk about this more, but things like possibilities like egg freezing are new and they're out there. And, I want to preface this with, it doesn't guarantee you're going to have a child by any means, but what it did for me, and I think talking to Alice and Mei, what it does is emotionally, it gives you more of a sense of you've done something proactively, and I think just myself in that proactiveness, I feel so much emotionally more, better charged and better able to deal with my fertility. So with that, I'd love to launch into, our panel right away. And again, we're going to have questions at the end, and this is a great group, so I hope we do have questions, because when I went into this process, I had a million questions and really nowhere to go. So Dr. Shanae, one thing we'd like to sort of start from the beginning and talk about why a woman would freeze her eggs and what are sort of the steps involved in the process. And I know that you've got some slides you'd like to share with us.
Sure, I'd be happy to show you a little bit of what you're up against when you're looking at using your fertility. So we've been doing egg freezing at Pacific Fertility Center for about 5-6 years now this year. And we've been very pleased with the results that we've been able to achieve with it so far. And we've helped a lot of patients in just managing their fertility and reducing the risk of age-related fertility problems later on in life. So let's look at some of this. Can you do the next slide for me? So this is the fertility curve. The fertility curve is kind of a law of fertility. It's the principle that really governs what we do every day. And what it shows is what I think all of you know, which is that things don't work so well when you get older. Fertility rates are quite good in younger age groups, for instance, the 20s and teens and even into the early 30s. But from the mid-30s on beyond, there's a very dramatic drop in fertility rates. And this is the trouble zone. If you're considering having a pregnancy when you are 35 and beyond, you're staring at trouble with your eggs. Why is that? Well, this is a very old paper from 20 years ago looking at egg numbers, showing a decline in egg numbers as you get older. Age is on this graph and the egg numbers on the other side. Do note, though, that this is an exponential curve, which kind of misleads you in what's really going on. This is actually the truth. You're born with probably 1 million eggs. By the time you reach puberty, age 13, 2/3 of those eggs are gone. And then you've got roughly 20 or 30 years to use those eggs before you get accelerated depletion in your 40s and total loss of the eggs in your 50s. So I hope you get the point. This is an incredibly valuable resource that you only have for a small period of time in your life. And you need to protect that and conserve it. It gets worse than that, though, because the problem is not just egg numbers, it's also how well the eggs perform or don't perform. This is data from our lab looking at genetic analysis of embryos at in vitro fertilization. And very simply, what it shows is that as you get older, eggs don't work as well. In an egg donor who might be 25 years old, in an in vitro fertilization cycle, what this graph shows is they produce on average 6, 7, or 8 embryos, 7 on average, in one treatment cycle. Whereas our 35 to 37-year-olds made 2 embryos, and women over 40 made 1 or less. So while you can still get eggs in these older age groups, they just don't perform as well. The 43 to 44 age group, that number is 0.2. So most cycles did not achieve a healthy embryo. A few did, but most did not. So it's both egg numbers and egg quality that's a problem, and it gets to be a very dramatic problem beyond about age 35 or 36. So what we're after is to manage that upper end of the curve. You know, there's a gap here between what you want, which is a family later in life, and what your ovaries and eggs are able to provide. And we're trying to fill that gap and, you know, find a way to preserve that fertility of youth for use later on in life. So the goals and what we're all going to be talking about here today is to understand and protect your fertility. What can you do to maintain it now and protect it? Plan for the future. Understand this is going to be an issue. If you're planning to have kids beyond age 35 and certainly beyond age 40, you need to think this through now and freeze your eggs if you're going to be in that situation. So thank you.
Great. Well, I'd love to hear now from Mei in terms of freeze your eggs, someone who has recently frozen her eggs. And can you just describe a little bit about the process or what made you initially decide to go through with it?
Sure. Well, I was 36 when I first heard about egg freezing. I was working on a book with Sarah Brokaw, who's also here at the conference, called Fortitude. And we were interviewing Dr. Jamie Griffo at NYU, who's a leading fertility expert. And he was showing us these exact charts, these numbers. And I just looked at them and I went, oh my God, you know, I really started to panic. And it still took me a year. So I was 36 and a half when I heard about that. It took me a year to make the decision to freeze my eggs. I kind of had to come to terms with the reality that I was still single, that I might not manifest that, you know, perfect someone. And if I really wanted to have kids, then I needed to take action. So, and also financially, it is quite an investment. And insurance does not cover it. So for me doing it at Stanford, the cost was about $11,000. And so I had to think about that too. I actually spoke with my family about it, and both of my parents, who are divorced, offered to contribute, which was really amazing. And it's actually, that whole process has been really wonderful for my family, bringing us together. So I went through the process of freezing my eggs at 37 and a half, and I think it's one of the best decisions that I've ever made. I immediately felt a sense of relief. When I had the 18 frozen eggs, I was just like, I could just breathe again. And I don't know if you guys felt that way, but it was like I didn't have to be that crazy woman, you know, in the dating scene who's like going around, you know, trying to meet the baby daddy. Like I could just go back to enjoying my life and feeling like I had time. And so I anticipated that being an outcome of the egg freezing. What I didn't anticipate was that I was blessed enough to connect with the love of my life just 6 months later, and I got married, and we're trying. Thank you. So that part is a happy ending, but you know what I didn't anticipate was that as we started to go through the process of working to get pregnant, that you know having the frozen eggs was also going to be a great relief and stress reduction as we started that process. So so I think it's actually, there are two benefits with the egg freezing. And my only kind of caveat is that I wish I'd done it when I was just graduated from college. You know, I wish I hadn't waited till I was 37. So.
And that caveat's an important one. I think most women I've talked to who've frozen their eggs just say, I wish I had known about this and I wish I had done it sooner. Yep. You never hear the other way around. But so Dr. Li Meng, we've talked about. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. How did your now husband react when you first told him that you had frozen your eggs? Was he? Because it's kind of new.
Right. No, that's a great question. Her question was, how did my now husband react? And he was thrilled. I mean, you know, and actually, I was casually dating someone at the time that I was going through the egg freezing process. We then broke up a few months later. But both of them were extremely positive. I mean, 100%. They're like, that's great. You're taking action. You're taking charge.
And they're like,
wonderful.
phew, no pressure for me.
Totally. She's good. Yeah. So, yeah, I had total support.
Alice, what about you being in the single world now? And some people have asked me on the blog, when do you tell someone do you tell them?
Well, for me, my story is very public, so I can't go on a first date. In fact, I begged people that I was meeting online, don't Google me. It's so unfair. You have an unfair advantage going into a first date if you Google me. I was 31 years old, and in some cases, I actually think it's so fortunate that I was diagnosed with cancer. I know it's a crazy thing to say, but 31 years old, I didn't have to go through that decision-making process. I didn't have to go through, oh my gosh, each year I'm aging, and I still haven't met Mr. Right, and I'm still single. I was 100% clear when I found out that my fertility would be at risk from cancer treatment, that I was going to preserve my fertility. I was handed a referral from my breast surgeon on a Friday for a reproductive endocrinologist. That physician couldn't even speak to me until the following Tuesday at 5 p.m. So we did a phone consult. And where I was in my cycle and where I was in starting chemotherapy, I actually had to go in at 7 a.m. the next day and start my medications. So between 5 p.m. and 7 a.m., I had to have that dialogue. And so there was no decision making. It was like, well, I'm doing this, and so let's just do it. I also did have a boyfriend at the time, and so at 6 p.m. when I got off the phone with the doctor, I walked into his home office and I said, so we have to freeze embryos because vitrification didn't exist yet. And the slow freezing method of egg freezing would only produce a 2 to 3% success rate. I was not okay with that. If somebody told me, you have a 2 to 3% chance of chemo working, would you do it? No. Yeah. So then when he said, well, I'm not going to freeze embryos with you because we don't have a future together, yeah, the world dropped out of the bottom.
Wow.
So although that ended up being a blessing because then I went through this incredibly empowering experience on my own. Fast forward to 10 a.m. that following day on that Tuesday, and I'm sitting with the business manager, and she hands me a catalog of sperm donors from the California Cryobank.
Wow.
And I wanted that, I wanted the sure insurance policy, so I went with embryo freezing. I actually, my ovaries are super overachievers, so I ended up with 31 eggs. Oh. And I was so lucky because I could actually freeze half embryos and half unfertilized eggs. So I have 14 toxicals that have been waiting for me. And then I have my 11 exicles. And so then, fast forward then, almost 4 years later when I met my husband and on our first date, and I had asked him politely, please don't Google me. He's like, okay, I won't. And it turned out that he didn't because he said, why didn't you want me to Google you? And I said, oh, there's a few things that you might find out. Like when I was dating that guy and he opened up Women's Health magazine and he read Sperm Shopping from a Catalog by Alice Creasy. Things like that. So, day one he said, well, that's fine. That's great. Like, we can have, that child. And he actually had adopted his first child. So I, was really blessed in meeting a man who, didn't have the strong, biological tie that a lot of people seek, including myself. And he went on to have another biological child. So he kind of had one of each already. So for us, he was on board from day one. But just the nature of my life and my lifestyle and sort of how public I am with everything and the nonprofit that I run called Fertile Action, there's too much information out there on me already.
Yeah. Let me get this straight. You have how many embryos and how many?
So I have 14 embryos and 11 eggs. So the embryos are fertilized eggs. Yeah, it's really great. Now I'll tell you, it's really exciting too because this Wednesday I'm doing my first frozen embryo transfer. Yay! So I have the happy glow of estrogen and progesterone right now. And I'm bloated like I'm already pregnant.
And not all of us are overachievers like Alice and me. I have 11 eggs frozen, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So numbers are very... Which, is still you've done something proactively, and you've got options. So, but we've talked a bit. I'd love to talk to Dr. Li Meng a little bit about, we've heard the word vitrification, and what is egg freezing? What are, now egg vitrification is a de facto method, and can you talk about the process a little bit and how it differs from slow freezing that, used to be done a few years prior?
So slow freeze have a long history. So mainly for embryo.
Yeah.
Just like people said, the slow freeze is kind of not very good for egg freezing. I think there's only a couple programs who still doing slow freezing egg. So most of people do not do it. It's simply because the egg in the temperature when it goes down, there's a damage there. So vitrification is short time but high concentration of cryoprotectin. Cryoprotectin is toxic. So you have to be careful. The person who do the egg freezing, you have to know that very well. Not only say like a cookbook. It's not like you follow a protocol from a company when you buy the solution. You follow that protocol. That protocol is working for average people. So if you want to do better, so if you just follow one protocol, you only can be one of the program can do it. But how can you do better than others? You need deeply understand cryobiology. So that means in the low temperature, what's the biological activity? So slow freeze is, in the beginning, you get like a perpendicular, trying to replace water inside the egg, and then temperature goes down. So there's some water frozen, then concentrate the solution in the slow freeze. But I don't want to go too much technique. But temperature go down and the solution concentration increased. And that whole process, because the temperature slowly go down, that's caused some damage. So vitrification is a super fast freeze. So I remember when I was a kid, we have candle. There's a fire there. You use a finger go past. So in the beginning, I feel scared, and then I feel it's fine. You get a fire there, you pass it, should be fine. The same thing when you do vitrification. It's like 30% cryoprotectin is very high, very toxic. But if you do it fast enough, it's not going to cause damage. The point is you need to have very good people, very good hand, and concentrate on that. So whenever our program, when we do egg freezing, before we do it, we have like a team meeting or teamwork. Doctor going to tell me, so Lee, we're going to have egg freezing at what time? So we will try and freeze egg within 2 hours. Actually, when I do it, it'll be even less than 2 hours. We finish the retrieval, I try to freeze them right away. So at that time, you have to be very clear mind, and at the end is high concentration cryoprotectin is very bad. So you have to control the temperature. You cannot think about anything. Oh, I got a phone call, someone will talk to you. You're trying to focus on that. And that's the one, it's really need a teamwork and doctor behind you and everybody. You have a lot of support, your colleague there. Make sure you are focused on that, working on that. So there's many programs offer that, but make sure when you go to shopping around, you talk to their doctor. Also, more important, probably you should talk to their embryologist because they are the one really do that work. The doctor get a retrieval. They have their plan for, like our program, Dr. Mars is very good on when they think about egg freezing. So we trying to adjust the protocol to make sure the egg can tolerate the frozen process the best. So that's a teamwork. When I get the best egg, so you do not have to get 20 eggs, 30 eggs, even 5 eggs, you get them work fine. 2 weeks ago, we have a 44 years old woman. So I freeze her egg at when she was 39. So she get pregnant now. So we mix the embryo transfer freezing egg and also her fresh egg. But think about 44 years old, and I freeze her at 39. So probably it's from egg freezing, but we never can prove. But the thing is, we need to be very, when you talk to people, you need to talk not only a doctor, you should talk to their embryologist. See how much they know about egg freezing. Asking them not only follow the protocol, asking them what is cryobiology? This is the key part. How come the same medium, somebody can do better and somebody not? So that's very important for you to keep in mind when you talk to people.
You know, Dr. Meng, that was such a great explanation. Thank you. And one thing that always comes to mind too is it's certainly not the norm, or we don't necessarily have the numbers just yet to suggest, oh, at 39, 5 eggs is enough to produce live offspring at 44 years old. And I think that one of the things that when I as a patient advocate counsel women who are embarking on this journey, that they have to consider what number is important to them, so that they feel that they've done everything they can, whether it's 5 or 10 or 15, or whatever that number is, because you don't actually know your fertility status until you go to make an embryo. You don't know if you have infertility issues with that quality of that egg until you actually produce something else. So I also like to fully inform women that it is not 100% eggsurance policy, but it is a policy. And each person is so individual about what your own comfort level is, and also just, in the fully informed consent process, knowing what those risks are down the road.
I think that's a great point, Alice. I mean, it's the option of having children in the future, and I think that's really the preface, that it is an option, it's not a guarantee. Dr. Meng was talking about questions that you can ask, or you should be talking to the doctor as well as the people behind the lab. And Dr. Jeanette, are there other questions? Because when I went in and got my eggs frozen, I didn't even know what to ask. And what would you recommend women who go into your office, sort of, if you had a hit list of questions, what should people be asking?
Well, I think you want to ask questions that you need answered, of course, and ultimately your doctor in the clinic is going to be your support system in this whole process and for several years into the future. And you just want to make sure you have a group that you can communicate well. So, put your questions together and organize them and ask them and see that if you're comfortable with the answers that you get. Also, a fertility preservation program is a little bit different than traditional fertility care. I mean, as patients that you're not trying to conceive. You don't know really anything about fertility drugs, and you're brand new to the process. That requires, from the fertility program, a lot more support structures in place: education, videos, handouts, and time. The time to spend talking you through the process and helping you understand. And one of the real critical things that I've seen is a lot of women who come in to see us are in trouble in relationships as well. And having some psychological support and counseling and those sorts of services available, just trying to figure out what guys are all about, kind of stuff, I think has been so helpful to a lot of women.
I had a gal in LA who called me and she said, I don't have cancer, will you still help me through this? And I said, God, of course I will. I'm not discriminatory. And she and her fiance had just ended their relationship. And she said, I was considering getting a boob job, and then I read your story, and I thought, maybe I should freeze my eggs. And I said, I'm a fan of that. Take the pressure off. You'll be a confident woman that you never even thought the boobs could give you. You'll be walking tall and saying, I don't need you, I don't need you. If you go the route that I did, where you pick out the perfect DNA from a catalog of sperm donors, then you have an even further empowerment to your dating life.
Meme, what about you in terms of questions that you maybe found out later that you wish you had known or
I had no idea what to ask. I mean, I think that's a really good question, because I just knew that I was going to one of the top fertility doctors. I knew that this doctor who I was working with at Stanford had co-authored studies on egg freezing. So I had confidence in the science that was going to happen there, but I didn't know what to ask. And actually, one of the most traumatic experiences of that whole egg freezing process, which on the whole was really positive and empowering, was going to the workshop that they gave on injections. I mean, I don't know, you go through the first half of IVF when you do the egg freezing. So you go through the exact same steps as someone who's going through IVF up to the point where they retrieve the eggs. The only difference is then they freeze the eggs instead of fertilizing them and implanting them back in you. So you have to do all of these injections, and I was nervous about that. And going to the class, I was the only single woman in that class. I had 5 or 6 other couples there, and the nurse talked the whole time about how your partner can help you, your partner can inject you, your partner. And I left in tears. I mean, I left sobbing. Like I was so crushed. And I actually ended up writing a blog about it on Huffington Post, so you can go find it. But, you know, I was like, why didn't you consider for a moment the fact that there was someone in that room who didn't have a partner? And I think that that's becoming more and more common as people have, you know, kids, single moms by choice, egg freezing, whatever. So I even felt like you should have a whole separate class for people who are doing it on their own. Yeah. But there was not much sensitivity around that. And so, you know, that was tough. So that's something to be prepared for.
And I had the exact same experience.
You did.
I was alone in a room of people doing IVF, and they asked if my partner was coming. And I thought, well,
It's
why would
different.
I freeze my, you know, why would I be freezing my eggs if I had, you know, Mr. Right here? So there's and I think that I talked to my clinic after, and basically I was given a huge folder, and it was for the IVF process, not the egg freezing process, and only about 50% was applicable to me.
Yep.
So later I went up and said, I'm in marketing communications, so it was a bad marketing move they made. And, you know, just said, you can basically throw this away. You're overwhelming people. You need to go to the new face of egg freezing, which are women, you know, like us on the panel. And I think egg freezing is really changing, and I think clinics, and I'm wondering, both of you, are you seeing sort of a new face of egg freezing? You know, what kinds of patients are you seeing come into your clinic today?
Yeah, definitely it's changing. We're seeing young professionals, you know. I work in San Francisco, which is a very, you know, high-tech, high intensity kind of environment, busy executives, attorneys, you know, people who value their careers. And they have to, one of the big issues is taking some time away from your job to put the time in that you need to do this.
It's kind of like having a child.
Yep.
It takes a lot of time to go through the process on the flip side when you're ready to have a baby.
I wanted to say just a little bit about are you a good candidate for egg freezing? Because I think that's important to think about. The key thing from my point of view as a fertility doctor is the younger you are, the better. Now, we don't have an age limit on egg freezing.
Yeah.
We will do it regardless of how old you are, but I can absolutely assure you that if you come in to see me at age 43, it's not going to work as well as if you had seen me at age 30. Younger women, we like to get about 12 eggs. The people in their mid-30s, 12 to 20 is sort of the guidance that we give. But then when you get up to age 40, to give yourself a realistic chance of success, you probably need 30 or 40 eggs, and you're just not going to get them.
Right.
The other thing, just quick clinical criteria, you'll probably get an ultrasound done as a first point, and that in that ultrasound, we're looking at an antral follicle count. We're looking at how many little baby junior follicles are sitting on the ovary. That's an excellent predictor of the kind of response that you're going to get. We also want to know how regular your menstrual cycles are. People with irregular or long cycles tend to be exquisitely sensitive to the fertility drugs. That's the 30 to 40 egg producer that you sometimes see. And often we'll do a blood test known as anti-Mullerian hormone, or AMH. That's probably the best blood test predictor of egg yields.
Absolutely, and to dovetail on AMH, if you haven't gotten a baseline AMH done yet, every single person in this room should do that as a great first step. It's one of the things that didn't exist when I was going through cancer, and so I don't have that marker to even show me how chemo truly impacted my ovarian reserve because I didn't have that blood test done. So I'm a huge advocate. I think it's a test that we should be doing on everyone when they start menstruating so that we have some kind of idea of where we stand from a fertility perspective, because until we hit that moment where we think, oh my gosh, time is running out, we're not really doing things to look at how fertile we are. We're only doing things to prevent pregnancy. Hence why you're all in the room. Because now you're at the point where, hey, maybe this is a good idea. Maybe I should consider doing this.
Yeah, there were some questions.
Great.
Yeah.
So we can open it, we're right on time to open it up to questions, so please go ahead.
I had two questions.
Yeah.
One, did you get really emotional during the injections? I mean, how does that, was it like 2 weeks?
We were just talking about this before the panel started because the question is, did you get really emotional on the injections? So what's ironic is that during the egg freezing experience, even though you're doing all these hormone injections, I always thought it was because I had cancer that I was so excited to be doing something that was life-giving. during a very dark time, and I felt like I was stimulating life force. I had a very spiritual experience with it, loved my belly getting really big and bloated, kept looking in the mirror like, oh, I can picture myself pregnant. That was happy for me. So I don't remember being emotional at all. Right now, forget about it. I'm incredibly emotional preparing for this frozen embryo transfer. And I'm not even doing that many medications, because when you do a frozen embryo transfer, because I'm not doing an egg retrieval, I'm not trying to stimulate my ovaries and create the perfect uterine environment at the same time. I highly recommend this, by the way. It is much easier in my perspective, and it is a lot fewer medications. But gosh, I'm just weepy all the time.
I found my emotions a little bit like rockier, but not so crazy out of control. I think it probably varies wildly from person to person. I mean, I'm sure the doctors would say it's very individual, but I didn't find it so crazy intense. And actually injecting myself was like a piece of cake. I mean, I was so nervous the first night. I had a girlfriend come over who'd done IVF, so she had all the experience, and she like coached me through it and just provided moral support, which was so great. But after I'd done it once, I was like, this is so easy. I mean, you barely feel the shots. Yeah. That was not such a hurdle as I imagined it to be going into it.
And it's all part of your choosing, right? So it's empowering. Right. And I think that when you approach it like that, that also helps with the whole injection idea. You know, and there's really, you know, even for me, I'm a breast cancer survivor who, you know, had an estrogen and progesterone sensitive cancer, and I've done all the research, I've sat in on all the research talks that me going through this, me carrying a pregnancy actually increases my survival rate. It doesn't actually hurt it at all. And I think that that's one of the scary things for a lot of women who might have a breast cancer in their family history or something, that, you know, going through this very short window where you're stimulating, you know, physicians like yourself are so good at monitoring your estrogen levels to make sure that you're not doing anything that's unsafe for your body. We have thousands, hundreds of thousands of babies that have been born this way. Mm-hmm. On the egg freezing side, we have over 1,500, just to be clear, but on IVF, there's hundreds of thousands.
And
I wanted to understand the differences between freezing eggs and embryos a little bit better, because we touched on it. And so when's a good time for freezing eggs, and when's a good scenario for freezing embryos?
The freezing egg is the one you have. If you can freeze embryo, you're supposed to freeze embryo if you have any, you know. But freezing egg is one you have. That's the only tumor you have no choice. You're freezing egg. And the freezing egg is very different, because the egg in the cell cycle, like we call it metaphase, and the embryo mainly in interphase. Because cell cycle different, there are different sensitivity to the outside the environment changing. So egg freezing always difficult and more procedure, and you have to be more accurate for every step. So probably I don't want to go too much technique part, but that's probably I can tell you.
The patient advocate perspective is you should do what you're comfortable with, but also just going back to my original point, which is you don't actually know the quality of your egg until you go to use it, unless you do a technique called polar body biopsy, but people aren't doing that in droves, and it's very expensive and experimental. So, you know, the older you are, from a patient advocate standpoint, I'm not going to speak on behalf of a physician, that the older you are, then the more at risk you are for that egg quality being not great. So, you know, each person has to decide what's right for them. You know, I certainly used a sperm donor. I'm about to have that sperm donor offspring with my current husband. You know, the egg freezing technology improving has been fantastic for individuals and couples who have ethical or moral or religious concerns about freezing embryos. And then, you know, the concern isn't even so much of the freezing of the embryos, the concern is the discarding of the embryos. So egg freezing technology has opened up this wonderful access to people who might have a barrier to doing fertility preservation otherwise, you know, which makes it really great for that as well. You know, sometimes I see couples, even married couples, when they're going through cancer, splitting the cycles because what if that spouse dies? And then, you know, whoever the remaining person is wants to still have children, And there are going to be legal documents that dictate in the event of death what happens to that genetic material. It becomes property. And in a community property state, then you have kinds of issues even with divorce. So egg freezing allows a whole myriad of opportunity for people who don't have to kind of go through that on the embryo freezing side. But where I stand, it's, maybe do at least a few, at least fertilize a few of the eggs, or maybe half of the cycle, if you have enough eggs to do that, where the physician and the embryologist are comfortable with that model, so that you have some kind of marker of where you really stand fertility-wise.
And I would just like to add, if you can freeze embryos, you should. That is the technology is better. So if you have the egg and sperm, it's better to freeze embryos.
The best available information we have now says there's no difference.
Really?
Embryo transparent. And
Really?
that literature is actually pretty extensive.
But don't half the eggs not make it through the unfreezing process?
But that probably happens in the fertilization
As
process.
well?
In the
Oh,
freshening
okay, well,
process
that's
as well.
great. That's new information.
Earlier Alice mentioned 2 to 3% is what it used to be.
Yeah.
So if you're saying it's as good now, what's the research
Well,
showing as to what the numbers
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you in our lab, we're getting 95% egg survival. We're getting 70% fertilization rates.
That's
and
amazing.
The pregnancy data is limited, but right now we have overall a 50% pregnancy rate in the recipiency of these eggs. It's going to be very age dependent, but it's working well.
That's great to hear.
In other words, what are those numbers for embryos? So the comparison.
Well, there's no real adequate comparison group because the comparison group is infertile couples. People have been trying for a year or 2 years. And just at age 35, those couples now get a 40 or 50% pregnancy rate with IVF. So I guess it's pretty similar numbers.
Wow, that's good to know.
Hi, I had a question regarding when you do the egg freezing or the embryo freezing. Let me ask it this way: how soon after that is done could it be implanted? Like she's having hers done. I mean, is it an
almost
instantaneous thing?
How fast can you use your eggs?
Yeah,
almost immediately. I mean, a month. We would have somebody take 1 month off to let their ovaries settle down, and then the following month.
And is that the same for an embryo, or?
Yep.
There's some questions in the back.
In the back, yeah.
Hi, I had a question about getting your levels tested. What would be the first step? Because I've been to my MD and he looks at me like I'm crazy and says, why would you want to do that? So he's like, you're young. And I'm like, I want to know. So
Good for you.
Bravo.
my mom had me late, so everybody's like, oh, you started late, you can have children late. And I'm like, well, I don't want to guess. I want to know. I like facts.
Genetics
Right
are
on.
a funny thing. They're not 100% accurate. You can't base the only thing that's the same, biologically speaking, is the onset of menopause.
Right.
That's the only thing that's stayed the
that's-
same throughout history.
That's another question that I had. They're like, well, how important is puberty? You said on average, a 13-year-old. Well, for someone who started when they were 16 or 17 like myself, how important is that?
We're all looking at you.
We're all
It's a great question.
Thank you.
So I sort of missed the point of the question. You're looking for predictors.
As far as getting your levels
Testing,
tested, what would be the first step? And I guess how important is the onset of puberty in regards to those levels currently?
Okay. If you have an educated OBGYN who's up on the latest stuff, that's a great place to
Which
start.
she is not.
That's usually the case because this is
Change
so
doctors. Yes. Seriously.
Probably the best thing today is just to go ahead and call a reproductive endocrinology program, an
I
IVF
agree.
program, and they'll be able to guide you right to what you need to do.
It's worth the investment. There are certain states that are kind of relaxing on coverage, at least in the cancer community, for consults. But I do think even if you have an OBGYN that might send a referral to an REI so that you could have the chance of having a consult covered, to be in the care of someone who has a fertility preservation program like we have on the panel is so different than to be in the care of someone who's used to delivering babies,
Yep.
and helping manage your contraception and everything. My organization is actually developing a whole certification program to help educate medical providers and offering them continuing medical education, because we see this huge gap between an REI that a fertile woman doesn't normally go see and the OBGYN that they're used to seeing. And we want to bridge that gap because there's only 1,500 of you in the whole country, and there's 45,000 OBGYNs. So we do see that we have to bridge that, but go to San Francisco, go see him.
And so the second part of my question, how important is the onset of puberty? I mean, sure, I don't want to take up everybody's time, so.
In general, what that means is that you have a lot of eggs available. There is some benefit to that. Someone who has a late onset of menses usually has a higher antral follicle count, so that's a good sign.
Thank you for your great talks, everybody. I'm Catherine DeOgarte. I'm a PFCLA doctor. I deal with a lot of single patients in my practice, and I always discuss with them egg versus embryo cryopreservation, and a lot of times they decide to do half and half. My question to you is, it's always tough deciding at which point the embryos should be frozen, at the 2PN stage, which is earlier, so the patient has more embryos, frozen, or later, so that they really know what embryos to deal with at the day 3 or day 5. I'm just wondering, in your practice, what do you guys do? Some of my patients do like a few cycles to have frozen at different stages, just so they know what they have available.
As you know, every program is different in their philosophy on this. For us at PFC San Francisco, we carry almost all of our embryos out to day 5 and do a day 5 blastocyst cryopreservation. That's worked out great for us. You know you're only cryopreserving quality embryos when you get to that point, and you get very high pregnancy rates on the thaw end.
I am so glad you asked that question. This is actually one of the devastating experiences for me in going through getting ready for a frozen embryo transfer, because for the last 5 years, I didn't look at my embryo report. I didn't look to see what day they were frozen on. I work in this industry as a patient advocate, work with patients every day, and until I went to use them, I didn't see that they were actually frozen at day 2. So on the patient side, I have a finite number of embryos to work with. I'm not producing more embryos. So I have my 14 that were frozen at day 2, and I know the numbers and I know what to expect. So we have to not only see who survives the thaw, then we have to see who just grows to day 3, and we'll drop off some there, and then we have to see who makes it to day 5, and I'm doing a day 6 transfer. So it adds a layer when you're working in fertility preservation of uncertainty that I'm not comfortable with. Other people and other practices might be perfectly comfortable with it. I wish that I had understood that process from the beginning, and had I, then I would have asked for them to at least at a minimum be frozen at day 3, but I would have preferred blastocyst stage, now knowing what I know.
Dr. Meng, you were going to...
Okay. From a biology aspect, cryobiology aspect, you freeze embryo at 2PN stage is the best. They can tolerate most the frozen process. So day 3 is okay. Blastocyst is wonderful. We do our regular patient after fresh embryo transfer, we always freeze blastocyst. But if you, from the survival rate and the embryo quality at the time you transfer, I prefer 2PN stage. That should be the best from the cell biology aspect, because 2PN stage, that's also in the cell cycle, is an interface. That's the best time to freeze. So 8 cell is day 3 of blastocyst. You always have some cell in interface, some of them are not, or some of them during the DNA synthesis. So freezing is interrupt to the cell process, to cell cycle. So 2PN stage, if you have choice, that's the best time to freeze.
24 hours.
24
right
hours.
After
at the time you check fertilization.
I can go now. We've been talking a lot about aging and the eggs that age, but there's a whole population of women that find out very young, at a very young age, little after puberty, that they are not going to be able to have their own children, and yet they can still use an IVF process. So my question to you is, how young would you freeze eggs on a woman such as an MRKH woman or someone who has been affected by endometriosis?
Good questions.
Yeah, another great question, and it's going to be very individualized. I don't think there is an upper or a lower limit. It's seeing the individual situation in front of us and figuring out the best thing to do, and looking at your goals and what you want to do. The MRKH that you mentioned, generally there's not an issue with early menopause in a situation like that. It's just access to the eggs. So at any time that she wants to do IVF, she'll have to use a gestational carrier most likely, but at any time, you can usually retrieve those eggs.
In the case of pediatric cancer patients, we do see research protocols for teens doing egg freezing, but we also have a great resource protocol kind of across the country for ovarian tissue freezing. In the case that they are.
Better in the peds
yeah. So there's no ovarian stimulation for them. It's a great option, especially if they can reuse the tissue down the road. There's so much advocacy that needs to happen in that, but I think it's important for everybody to just start becoming aware of it. Because if you have somebody who isn't going to even go through puberty naturally, then you could actually reimplant the tissue that will then, jumpstart natural hormone production again. And we're seeing really fantastic results with that. And there's already been over 15 babies born from this process, which is pretty incredible. The first time I heard about it in 2008, they were talking about reimplanting the tissue in your arm, and you can actually see ovulation happening. So they knew that it was going to work. And it is working, but we have a lot more data that we have to collect and a lot more people that need to go and try to use the tissue again. And then of course there's another research option, which is to take the follicles from that tissue and do what's called in vitro maturation. So there are options. They're experimental.
Any other there's a question.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I actually have a question from online. How long do frozen fertilized eggs last? And same for unfertilized eggs. How long can they be frozen?
Great question.
Okay, the egg freezing is kind of new, so most patients you freeze them, you do not have time, do not have a chance to solve them. So for egg freezing, we do not know that data, so they freeze still in the liquid nitrogen tank. So I don't think we have very good data on that. But for embryo freezing, I know there's like a 20. From Boma, I know there's 35 years old embryo freezing sawing. Human, I heard, if my memory correct, probably 25-some years old on sawing. Is okay. When I'm working on monkey on research, we have 14 years of freezing embryo sawn and pregnant. So probably there's no limitation because that's minus 196 degree temperature, biological, everything almost shut down. So it should be okay. Time may not be an issue.
I'm just curious from the point, if you decide to get your eggs frozen and you begin doing the shots and everything, how long is it until the egg's actually frozen?
Not long.
It's not long. I mean, I think it was like
12 days.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, it's a pretty compact process. Yeah. It's 12 days. It took me 3 months because I developed a cyst, so we had to cancel that cycle. And then the next cycle, I was all geared up, and I missed my period. I haven't missed my period since I was about 18, and I think it was really just the stress of, emotional stress of what I was going through. But that whole time period is a 12-day period, so it's fairly a quick period and 10 days of shots. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does it work if you, for example, are using a surrogate that you obviously want it to be your own biological child? How does it work when in that aspect? I mean, is it any
Yeah, the question is, how does a surrogate work into all of this? And so that would be a situation where somebody has a hysterectomy, perhaps, and then they want to freeze their eggs or freeze their embryos. And it's really easy. I mean, that is your biological child. The biological definition is the genetics. Your gene material is being used to produce that baby through your egg, and so that's your biological child. And in California, it's a simple process. Your attorney writes a letter that goes in front of a judge. The judge says, hey, this is your baby. Your name goes on the birth certificate, done.
I think we have time for one more question. So
I was wondering, did any of you
go ahead and we'll take you, and then we'll.
It's a quick
cut it.
question.
Yeah.
Did any of you ladies use acupuncture before the egg freezing process, just to?
I had used acupuncture throughout my adult life. So I didn't incorporate it directly into the egg freezing. I did over the last year because my husband and I did try naturally last year, and I had 4 chemical pregnancies. And so I was using acupuncture all through that, and then for this cycle as well, mostly to counteract the steroid jitters, because I'm a little high-strung right now. More so than normal.
Maymay, did you?
I didn't, but I would.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing it now, so I would recommend it.
No, I didn't. I would, though.
Hi. I have 2 quick questions. One is, based on everything that you're discussing today, what would help a patient at the moment of deciding what would we have to look for to decide between egg freezing in the egg stage versus going through the day 2, day 3, and freezing at that stage? Because what I'm going to take away from me when I walk out is I have like 10 frozen eggs right now, and what I'm going to walk out feeling is, oh wow, now I have to worry about all the stages that they're going to have to go through and how much is going to be left at the end. Whereas on the flip side, I've also heard what you had mentioned, doctors, that they're both almost equally equal in their success rates. That's my one question. And the second question is kind of playing the devil's advocate. As advanced as the freezing processes are, what does happen to that, the quality of that, versus at the time of transfer when you compare it to a fresh transfer? Is it really almost the same, or what is the difference?
Well, so to be clear about the difference between egg and embryo freezing, the main thing is if you freeze embryos, you've made a commitment to a sperm source. Right. You know who the genetic dad is. You don't have any other options. It's done. Yeah. Now, the other thing on egg freezing, there's not as much literature. You know, we've been doing it for 6 years now. You know, there are 1,500, 2,000 babies born from egg freezing. Embryo freezing, there are maybe 200,000 kids born or more, maybe 1 million kids for all I know. It's huge. So there's a difference in experience level, and there's always going to be a little question about exactly what the outcomes are going to be with egg freezing. That's just part of the egg freezing process. I think what you do is just think through your own individual situation and make the best choice you can. The egg freezing is a good procedure now, which offers you a good chance to reduce the risk of problems later on in life.
Great. Well, with that said, we're over, so I just wanted to thank our panelists. It was really a great panel. We appreciate it. And to also thank Fertility Planet as well. All these sessions are being live streamed by Ustream, so you can access them free all weekend, and then they'll be on demand later. But thank you all for attending, and we appreciate your questions. Were great.
That's great.
Yeah, very good questions.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh boy.
Yes. Hi, I'm Alyssa Moore. Oh, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. I'm going to be the speaker manager for the next
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so